Sometimes, life has a way of teaching lessons in the most unexpected ways. It started on an ordinary day at a busy clinic, where a respected white doctor made a choice that would soon come back to haunt him. A black patient walked in, seeking help, but instead of offering care, the doctor refused, letting prejudice guide his decision. Little did he know, this moment would set off a chain of events that would flip his world upside down. The patient, calm but visibly hurt, left the clinic without saying much, but his quiet departure carried an air of mystery. Days later, the clinic buzzed with the news of a new boss arriving, a leader who was about to change everything. As the doctor prepared to meet his new superior, he couldn't have imagined the shocking revelation waiting for him. What happens when the tables are turned? Stay tuned. The doctor couldn't shake a strange feeling as he prepared for the clinic's big announcement. The new boss was someone from out of town, and while the staff whispered about their impressive credentials, the doctor barely paid attention. He was confident in his position and reputation, convinced no one could overshadow him. But something about the way the clinic's board emphasized change made him uneasy. Meanwhile, the patient he had dismissed days earlier was on his mind more than he wanted to admit. There was something about the man's quiet dignity that lingered. He had expected anger or a confrontation, but instead, the patient had left with a composed but piercing glance. It felt like a mirror reflecting his actions back at him. When the day came, the staff gathered in the conference room, the air buzzing with curiosity. The door opened and the doctor's heart sank. The new boss stepped into the room, their presence commanding immediate attention. The doctor's breath caught as he recognized a familiar face. It was the patient he had turned away just days before. For a moment, the room felt silent, though murmurs of surprise rippled through the staff. The new leader smiled, polite and composed, but there was a weight behind their words as they introduced themselves. The doctor sat frozen, his confidence cracking under the realization. He replayed their brief interaction in his mind, now fully aware of its consequences. The new boss, Dr. James Carter, wasted no time getting to work, discussing plans to improve the clinic and make it more inclusive. Every word felt like a subtle reminder of the lesson the doctor had yet to face. As the staff applauded the vision for the clinic, the doctor struggled to maintain his composure, knowing he couldn't escape the truth much longer. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. Dr. Carter's leadership was sharp yet approachable, and his vision quickly gained the admiration of the clinic's staff. The energy of inclusivity and growth filled the air, but for the doctor, every meeting, every conversation, felt like a test he couldn't pass. Dr. Carter never mentioned their prior encounter, but the unspoken tension was undeniable. During a staff meeting, Dr. Carter introduced new training sessions focused on empathy and equitable treatment for patients. The doctor felt the spotlight burn on him, even though no names were called. His colleagues praised the initiative, unaware of the personal storm brewing inside him. Then came the moment he had been dreading. Dr. Carter requested a private meeting with him to discuss a matter of importance. As he walked to the office, his mind raced. This was it, the confrontation he couldn't avoid. The doctor entered Dr. Carter's office, his heart pounding like a drum. He braced himself for a confrontation, imagining a pointed lecture or even worse, public exposure. Instead, Dr. Carter greeted him with the same calm demeanor he had displayed during their first encounter. The unexpected warmth caught him off guard. "I wanted to talk about something important," Dr. Carter began, his tone measured. The doctor tensed, waiting for the moment when the past would be laid bare. But instead, Dr. Carter slid a patient file across the desk. "This is one of your long-term patients. They shared concerns about feeling dismissed during visits. I think we can work together to ensure everyone feels heard." The words hit harder than any reprimand. It wasn't just the single moment of prejudice, it was a pattern he hadn't even noticed in himself. Dr. Carter's approach wasn't about vengeance, it was about change, and that made it sting even more. Just as the doctor thought he understood where this was going, Dr. Carter leaned back and said something that flipped the situation on its head. You're not the only one who has something to learn here. Let me tell you why I chose to take this position." Dr. Carter's words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The doctor, still reeling, leaned forward, unsure of what was coming next. "I took this position," Dr. Carter said, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability, "because I've been on the other side of that desk, dismissed, judged, and overlooked in places that were supposed to help me. That experience shaped me, but it also gave me a responsibility to change the system from within." The doctor felt a knot in his chest tighten. It wasn't anger or humiliation anymore. It was something deeper, shame, mixed with the realization of his blind spots. "I never meet," he started. Dr. Carter held up a hand gently. "I know," he said. "Most people don't. That's why I'm here. To make sure no one leaves this clinic feeling like their worth depends on anything but the care they deserve." The doctor nodded, his mind racing. He expected judgment, but instead found grace. Dr. Carter extended his hand, signaling a fresh start. "Let's lead this change together." But just as the doctor reached out, Dr. Carter smiled knowingly and added, "By the way, I was never going to say anything about our first meeting. I wanted to see if you'd come to me." The doctor froze, realizing the lesson wasn't just in words, it was in action. The doctor left Dr. Carter's office, feeling a mix of relief and reflection. The conversation had shaken him, but it also opened his eyes in a way nothing else could. Over the following weeks, he worked alongside Dr. Carter, not just as a colleague, but as a student of the change they were building together. The clinic began transforming into a place where every patient felt valued, regardless of their background. The doctor, once blind to his own biases, found himself listening more, asking questions, and learning from the very people he had once overlooked. Dr. Carter's leadership wasn't about pointing fingers, but about lifting everyone up, including the doctor himself. In the end, the experience became a turning point. The doctor realized that redemption isn't in hiding from mistakes, but in confronting them and doing better. And for the clinic, a culture of respect and care became its greatest strength.